So we'll discuss some Inyani Purim tonight, and we'll pick the topic of the Megillah reading, and specifically we'll get into whether women are obligated in the mitzvah of Mikra Megillah, the mitzvah of hearing Megillah Esther. So let's go see the Gemara Megillah, Daf Daled Amud Aleph 4a says, V'amar Rav Shua ben Levi, Rav Shua ben Levi says, Nashim chayavos v'mikra Megillah. The women are obligated in Mikra Megillah. Why? Sha'af hein ahayu ba'oso anes. They too were involved in the miracle of Purim. The miracle being, as we all know, Haman convinced Achashverosh to let him make a decree to kill all the Jews. And we know the story, V'nafachu, it was reversed, so when Haman himself got hung at the end. So the women were included in the decree of being killed, men, women, and children, and they were saved, and therefore they're also involved in the miracle, hence they're also obligated in the mitzvah of Megillah. Where else do we find, by which other two mitzvahs, it's only 3 times in the Talmud, which other 2 mitzvahs do we find this concept that women are obligated in the mitzvah because they were involved in the miracle? Because normally Mikra Megillah, reading the Megillah, is done on Purim. That's a time-oriented mitzvah. So we have a general rule that women are exempt from mitzvahs aseh shazman grama, positive commandments that are time-bound. So the basic mitzvahs like sukkah, they're exempt from. Lulav, not that they can't do it, they can do it, and it's praiseworthy if they volunteer in most of the mitzvahs, but they're not obligated. They're not obligated in shofar, they're not obligated in sukkah and lulav, but if they do it, it's praiseworthy and it's encouraged. But Rabbi Shua ben Levi is telling me something even more, a big chiddush, a novel interpretation, that even though Megillah reading is a time-oriented mitzvah, but nevertheless, women are obligated because they also were involved in the miracle. They were included in the gzeira of lahashmid ulaharog, as called Yehudim. So that's Rabbi Shua ben Levi's chiddush, that women are obligated in the mitzvah of Megillah. So my question is, what other 2 mitzvahs does Rabbi Shua ben Levi say the same thing about? They would have been exempt. It's a mitzvah aseh shazman gram. It's a time-oriented mitzvah. But because they're involved in the miracle, we say they're obligated. So the 2 other cases Rabbi Shua ben Levi brings down is near Hanukkah, that even though one would think women should be exempt from lighting Hanukkah candles because you can only do it on Hanukkah, so it's a time-oriented mitzvah, but since they were involved in the miracle of Hanukkah, they are also obligated. And the 3rd example the Gemara gives is Pesach night by the 4 cups. The Daled Kosas, drinking the 4 cups of wine, is a rabbinical mitzvah. I would have thought they're exempt. Therefore, Av Hein HaYuvosanei tells me they're obligated. So those 3 mitzvahs are singled out by Rabbi Shua ben Levi in the Gemara, that even though women are normally exempt from time-oriented mitzvahs, nevertheless, when it comes to Megillah, Hanukkah, and the 4 cups, women are obligated. We'll focus on Megillah for now, since Purim's coming up, and we'll deal with Hanukkah and Daled Kosas another time. So all the Gemara says is women are obligated in the mitzvah because they are also involved in the miracle. So one would think, and as Tosas points out, as well as the Rush, based on the simple reading of the Gemara, Mikan Mashma, from here it's implied, Shahanoshim Motzios Es Acherim Yidei Chovasan. So from here, Tosfos and the Rush point out, it seems from the simple reading of the Gemara that women are obligated, and therefore they can also read the Megillah for others. So this, based on the simple reading of the Gemara, you should be able to have a woman reading the Megillah for men as well. Because at first glance they seem to be on the same level of obligation. That's the opinion of Tosfos. However, Tosfos quotes the opinion of the Baal Hilchos Gedolos, the Bahag, who disagrees and says, the Isha Motzia Mino Avalo, no. That the Bahag says, no, it's true a woman is obligated in the mitzvah of reading the Megillah. But only for other women she could do it for. But a woman cannot read the Megillah for a man. That is the opinion of the Bahag, the Baal Hilchos Gedolos. And I think the Rush quotes him, we don't have a Rush in front of me, but he writes something along the lines that woman cannot read the Megillah for men. So the question is, why not? Based on the simple reading of Tosfos, like Tosfos and Rush say, one would have thought that a woman can read it for a man. What's bothering the Bahag that he says that a woman cannot read the Megillah for a man? So there's many interesting interpretations of this Baal Hilchos Gedolos, and I'll share a couple with you tonight. So one is the Mikrai Kodesh of Tzvi Pesach Frank. That's the name of his sefer. He used to be, I think, one of the chief rabbis in Jerusalem. He quotes from the Marcheshes. Marcheshes is one of the great Achronim, one of the great rabbis as well. And he wants to explain based on another Gemara in Megillah. There's another famous Gemara in Megillah. I think it's Daf Yudalad. We'll do it by heart. We know Purim is a happy day. You may mishta v'simcha. We have a Suda, we have a meal. It's a day of joyous occasion. And that's why it's a discussion whether you have the dinam of an onain or avelos on Purim, because Purim is a happy day, according to all. So, normally what do we do on a happy day, on a Yontif? We say Hallel. We sing praises of Shira, Hallel. Like on Hanukkah. Hanukkah we say Hallel. The Gemara tells us 18 days a year we recite the Hallel, and 21 days out of Israel. What are the 18 days in Israel? The 8 days of Hanukkah, the 8 days of Sukkot, that's 16, 1 day Passover, and 1 day Shavuos. We only do full Hallel on the first day in Israel, and we add 3 more days for Chutz La'aretz, Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuos. We add a day each for Yontav Sheni Shel Golios, and therefore we have 21 days. So Purim is left off the list, and the obvious question is, we usually compare Hanukkah to Purim. So why does Hanukkah have Hallel, but not Purim? So that's the Gemara's question in Megillah Yudal. Why no Hallel on the holiday of Purim?
Because it didn't take place in Israel.
Very good. So the Gemara suggests 3 answers. A1, the first answer the Gemara suggests is because it happened in Chutz La'aretz. It did not happen in the land of Israel. Hanukkah happened in Israel, but Purim happened in Persia and other places, and we only say Hallel on a miracle that happened in Israel. What are you talking about? Last I checked, the Exodus from Egypt did not happen in Israel. It happened in Egypt. That's why we call it Yetzias Mitzrayim. So how come we could say Hallel? So that the Gemara says you're right. but we invoke it's tax season now. We're getting our T4s. It's the end of February. We invoke the grandfather clause, that once Yoshua took the Jewish people into the land of Israel, then Israel becomes a prerequisite to say Hallel. But clearly before we lived in Israel, obviously Israel wasn't an impediment to say Hallel. So that's the answer number one. The Gemara says that the miracle happened in Chutz La'aretz, out of Israel. A1. What's A2? What's the second answer? The second answer is Kriyasa Zu Halela, which means we do read Hallel. We do say Hallel on Purim, but it's a different type of looking and sounding Hallel. It's called Megillah Esther. We read the scroll of Esther. And what greater Hallel? We're talking about, we do Purim Nisa. We talk about the great miracles of what happened on Purim. So the second answer is we do Hallel, but Hallel is the Megillah. It's not the classical Hallel as we know it, but we read from Megillah Esther. That takes the place of Hallel. And answer number 3 is Akate Avdei Achashverosh Anan. That it's true we were saved from the decree of the evil Haman, but we're still under the dominion of Achashverosh. Achashverosh still ruled, we still were under his dominion, and we can always say Hallel, we're in the state of Avdei Hashem. We're in the state of servants of God and not servants to anyone else. So that's why by Mitzrayim we became no longer Avdei Paro, but we were Avdei Hashem. And that's why we could say Hallel on Pesach, but not now. So we have 3 answers why no Hallel on Purim. Answer number 1 was Chutz La'aretz. It didn't happen in Israel. Answer number 2, the Megillah takes the place of Hallel. Answer number 3, we were still under the dominion of Achashverosh. So let's focus on answer number 2 here. Answer number 2 was and is that we read Megillah Esther. That takes the place of Hallel. In fact, the Meiri has a very interesting question. So if that's true, so if you live in a small town that doesn't have a Megillah and it's Purim, then you should say Hallel. Because the Gemara says we don't say Hallel because we read the Megillah. But let's say you don't have a Megillah Esther, so the Meiri says, it seems very compelling that you read Hallel. We don't pass like this Meiri. That's a discussion for a different time. But the point being is, Megillah takes the place of Hallel. So we know is so what do we see from this Gemara? That besides the mitzvah of Mikra Megillah that we have on Purim, there's another element of fulfilling the mitzvah of Hallel. There's a dual element, Megillah Esther, and there's an aspect of Hallel we get. By reading the Megillah, we get some type of fulfillment of the mitzvah of Hallel.
But the name of Hashem is not in the Megillah.
Excellent. Very good. The name in the Megillah is the only book in Tanakh that doesn't have the name of God. And the reason is because, as Esther indicates, her name Esther means hidden. Hester Panim, that God was behind the scenes. If you look at the story of the Megillah, it looks like one big coincidence after another. Achashverosh couldn't sleep. He's reading his books, and then Esther comes, Mordechai, the whole story, and it's one coincidence after another. And that's why, in fact, that's how we explain why we don't, against the Meiri. Why do we assume that even if we don't have the Megillah, we read Hallel? We don't do Hallel because it's a totally different Hallel. The Hallel we do is recognizing the greatness of God and on more open miracles. This Hallel is it's a hidden Hallel. It's seeing God behind the scenes. As one of the great rabbis was traveling, I think it was during the Holocaust, he was running away. I think they ended up in Russia somewhere. So the Rabbi told to one of his students, "Go get me the newspaper." So the student was taken aback. He said, "Well, Rabbi, do you read Russian? Like, why should I get you a Russian newspaper?" He says, "No, I don't read Russian, but I read in between the lines. That's the important thing. Not what they write in the news, but reading what's behind, what's actually going on." So either way, so getting back, so there's a so it is true, but there's a second dimension. So the Marcheshes points out, in general, are women obligated in Hallel or not? The answer is no. It's a time-oriented mitzvah, and they're exempt from. So that's what the Marcheshes says. What's the explanation in the Hilchos Kedolos? The Gemara says women are obligated in Megillah, and Tosas and the Russ seem to say, therefore it should follow that a woman could read the Megillah for a man. Yet the Baal Hilchos Kedolos says no. So what's the reason? Why no? So the Marcheshes says, I'll tell you why a woman can't do it for him, because in a man, in addition for fulfilling his mitzvah of Mikra Megillah, he also gets the fulfillment of Hallel. Women who aren't obligated in Hallel, they can't fulfill the mitzvah of Hallel for the man. And that's why the Bahag writes, a woman should not read Megillah for a man, because the man will be lacking in his fulfillment of Hallel. That's how the Marchesha says, that's the reason why a woman should not read the Megillah for the man. That's one explanation in the Bahag. Another interesting explanation, explaining what's the reason for the Bahag that women cannot read Megillah for men. So there's a famous answer from the Turei Even. So the Turei Even writes as follows, he quotes this Gemara we just read, that Noshim Chayavos b'Mikra Megillah, women are obligated in Mikra Megillah, because Af Hein Hayu Ba'oso Hanes. Really, they should be exempt, because it's a time-oriented mitzvah. Comes Rashua ben Levi and says they're obligated because they're involved in the miracles. So they're obligated rabbinically speaking from the rabbis. Why are men obligated in the Megillah? Where is the source of the obligation of men in the Megillah come from? So the Turei Even says it comes from the Megillah. It comes from Megillah Esther. That we learn we're obligated to read the Megillah. So what do we call that? That's called, we know there's Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. Torah is Torah, the Nun is for the prophets, and Ksuvim are the writings. So things that come from the Bible are usually Minat Torah, biblical. The things that come from Nach, either Nevi'im and Ksuvim, it's what we call Divrei Kabbalah, not Kabbalah, like Madonna and Kabbalists, but Kabbalah as words of the prophets, Divrei Kabbalah. And therefore, Divrei Kabbalah, the Gemara writes in Rosh Hashanah, Divrei Kabbalah Kedivrei Torah Dami. We treat Divrei Kabbalah like words of the Torah. And therefore, the Turei Even writes, this is the explanation of the Baal Hilchos Kedolos. You know why women can't read the Megillah for men? Because women are only obligated rabbinically by the rabbis because they were involved in the miracle. But men are obligated based from the Megillah, from the words of the prophets, and hence someone who's on a lower level, that's a general rule, if you're on a lower level obligation, you can't do the mitzvah for someone else. Hence, women cannot read the Megillah for a man. So that's the second explanation of what's the explanation of the Bahag, why a woman can't read the Megillah for a man. The first one was the Marcheshes, that women are exempt from Hallel, and therefore the man would be lacking in his Hallel dimension. Or secondly, like the Turi Even, a man's on a higher level obligation because he's Midivrei Kabbalah, while a woman is only obligated rabbinically. So it would come out then, if that's true, but it would come out, if this is true according to the Turi Even, that maybe at nighttime a woman can read the Megillah for a man, because we're only obligated in the morning to read it, based on Divrei Kabbalah. The rabbis instituted to read it at night as well. And therefore, so at nighttime maybe you'd have more to rely on, but we'll get back to it. That's the Turi Even. The Or Sameach, Reb Meir Simcha HaKohen, who was killed by the Nazis, the Machshemo, that they were in Nazi Germany. He writes another reason. He writes that we have another mitzvah which is coming up in a couple of weeks, the mitzvah of remembering Amalek, the mitzvah to remember our obligation to destroy Amalek. And since that's a milchama, that's a war, we know women are exempt from war. Nashim lav b'nei milchama ninhu. Women are exempt from wars. So he says, or it's about, by reading the Megillah, we also fulfill our mitzvah, Haman, Amalek, we fulfill our mitzvah of remembering Amalek, and therefore a woman can't do it for a man, because a woman can't accept a man from the mitzvah of remembering Amalek, because she's exempt from. So that's the third possibility. Either we have the Marcheshes, it has to do with Hallel, we have the Turi Even, it has to do with the level of obligation, we have the Or Sameach, it has to do with Mechias Amalek, and then we have the Avnei Nezer. We have a fourth approach, that if you look at the words of the Bahag, the Rush quotes, the Bahag says, because women are only obligated in hearing the Megillah, while men are obligated in reading the Megillah. So what does the Bahag mean? So Avnei Nezer says as follows. Let's say if I asked you a question, let's say Friday night, I don't know, how does it work? You make Kiddush? How does it work Friday night in your house?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I mean, he makes Kiddush and you... Right, okay, so I ask you, did you make Kiddush or did you hear Kiddush? What would you tell me?
I heard Kiddush.
Right, so the average person would say, they heard Kiddush. Same thing, Havdalah, and any other example. Megillah, you'll say you heard the Megillah. However, that is true biologically and physically, but we have a principle in the Talmud called Shomea Ka'ona, which, again, the different interpretations to what it means, but the one we'll use now is, let's say it's true, we're all obligated in Kiddush. Men and women are biblically obligated in Kiddush. So let's say the three of us here, I make Kiddush. So what's Pshat in Shomea Ka'ona? Is the Kiddush that by you listening, is, in other words, will you say Kiddush by hearing it? That's the simple explanation. Oh no. Shomea Ka'ona is telling me something more for the Lamdin, that the Kiddush is that by you hearing it, it's attributed to you. We view like you actually said it, because the chiyuv is to make Kiddush. So therefore we assume not only al pi halacha, we view it everyone made Kiddush. So only for the academic elite would understand that principle, that everyone's really making Kiddush. But the average person will view it as everyone's hearing Kiddush and one person making it. So we know we have a principle that women are obligated because afhein hayu ba'osa hanes. women are obligated in Mikra Megillah, in the reading of the Megillah, because they were involved in the miracle. They were saved from the decree of Haman. So it's Afhain. They're only because it's Persume Nisa. There's a mitzvah to publicize the nace. So when we talk about publicizing the miracle, we always publicize it in a way where everyone understands. Just to publicize it, to publicize the miracle in a way that no one's knowing, very few people will know you're publicizing, it doesn't get you much, doesn't help. When we publicize a miracle, we want to do it for the Hamonam. We want to do it for everybody. So he says like this. So obviously, so what does the Bahag mean? That women are only obligated in hearing the Megillah, because when we deal with Persume Nisa, it has to be recognizable to everybody. So it looks to everyone that you're hearing the Megillah. So women are only obligated in hearing the Megillah. But men have an obligation of reading the Megillah. And therefore that's why a woman can't read the Megillah for a man. Because a man have a higher level of reading the Megillah, while women only have an obligation of hearing. So let's summarize. We started off, we have an obligation of Megillah Esther. And the Gemara says even women are obligated because they're even though they normally are exempt because it's a time-oriented mitzvah, but they're obligated. And simple pshat is that they're same as men, and therefore a woman can read it for a man. Comes along the Baal Hilchos Gedolos and says, no, a woman cannot read it for a man. So the question is, why not? So we gave 4 different explanations why a woman can't read the Megillah for a man. Either like the Marcheshes, because the man would be lacking, there's a component of Hallel in the reading of the Megillah, and a woman is exempt from Hallel. But if a woman reads the Megillah for a man, he'll be lacking in its Hallel component of the mitzvah of Megillah. A2 was the Turi Even, that men are obligated from the prophets, while women are only obligated from the rabbis. So someone on a lower level obligation can't do it. Someone who's only obligated rabbinically can't do it for someone who's obligated midivrei Kabbalah. Number 3, we had the Or Sameach. Women are exempt from the mitzvah of remembering Amalek. And therefore when you read the Megillah, you get a fulfillment of that mitzvah, so hence the man's obligation will be lacking. And the 4th one is the Avnei Nezer, that when we publicize miracles, we do it in a way that everyone understands, and therefore a woman is only obligated in hearing the Megillah. But a man is obligated in reading the Megillah, so therefore a man must read for a woman and not the reverse. So halacha l'maisa, obviously the minhag is that women do not read the Megillah for a man. However, it's a machokas rishonim. So obviously, hypothetically, if you're in a town and the only one who knows how to read the Megillah is a woman, so then then it's best. Then I would say it's better to hear from a woman, because according to those Tosis and the Rush, according to different rishonim, a woman can read the Megillah for a man. But we're machmer for the shitas of the Bahag not to. So if you have a man, it's best that you hear a Megillah, you go to a regular reading. But push comes to shove, you might as well hear the reading from a woman, as in contrast to not hearing. Because worst case, you're not yotze, but in best case you are. So there's no harm in listening if there's no other option. Any questions, comments?
Is the woman obligated to make Kiddush if the man is not there?
So a woman, most definitely yes. A woman, and she's obligated to do Megillah if a man's not. She could read Megillah to herself also, that's okay. A woman can read for another woman. That's not a problem in terms of... The minhag is there from a man also, but a woman reading to another woman, they're on the same level. But Kiddush, certainly a woman is obligated biblically in the mitzvah of Kiddush, and if there's no man around, she is obligated to make Kiddush. And also by Havdalah, it's preferably she hear Havdalah from a man, but if push comes to shove, she should make it herself if she can't hear Havdalah from any other man.
So Kiddush, she's obligated biblically. lighting the candles rabbinically.
Lighting the Shabbos candles Friday night?
Yes.
Yeah, so the truth be told, it's not the woman's obligation per se, it's the obligation of the home. Both the husband and wife are equally obligated in candles. The custom is, the minute developed, the woman ran the house, whatever the reason was, but that was the woman, because al pi Kabbalah, that Eve caused Adam to sin, and that caused darkness to the world, so the woman took on the mitzvah of lighting the candles. Whatever the reasons are, the bottom line is, it's an obligation for men and women, but our meaning is that the woman does it. But of course, if a woman's not there, then a man has to light candles also.
I see. And it's rabbinic.
It's rabbinic, maybe simple pshat. It's rabbinic. Some want to say maybe it's, well, you could say maybe it's also from the prophets, because it comes from the Karasik Shabbos Oneg, a pasuk in Yeshaya. So the discussion, maybe it's Divrei Kabbalah. Some want to say maybe it's Halacha Moshe Messina, but it's either Divrei Kabbalah or rabbinical. But either way, whatever it is, it's an obligation on man and women. In fact, it's a separate share, but it's interesting that women do it, because normally, that especially for Sephardi women, they don't make brachas on mitzvah saseh shazman grama. So how could a woman, to Ashkenaz women it's okay, but it's a kasha more on Sephardi women, how do they light Shabbos candles? It's a time-oriented mitzvah, and they normally don't make, so that's a separate discussion. It's probably included under the mitzvah of Zohar V'Shamar, the mitzvah of Kiddush, and they come up with other reasons. But the bottom line is, women are obligated in Kiddush biblically.